come across quite a few examples recently dealing with people that have inherently, I would say, non-productive or toxic mindsets, not just for their own lives, but for the lives of everybody around them. One thing that springs to mind is I know several people who are who've built their identity on their intelligence. Now, these people generally they've got proof of said intelligence, whether it's being a member of the Mensa, whether their family members are highly acclaimed scientists or something of the sort. So their identity being based on their high IQ or their high competent processing capacity is not just it's not a subjective issue. It is objective that they do have a proclivity to have a very high cognitive ability. Now, the problem with this is while it's true and objectively you can show it, um, there's an old American saying, if you're so smart, how come you ain't rich? And I think there's a deeper level here that we should not ignore because the average IQ is at 100. This concerns obviously white Europeans at 100. So let's assume one of these people that I'm talking about has an IQ of 130, 140, 150. So we might say probably two standard deviations on the upper scale, which means that they're probably smarter than 90% of the population, or perhaps even in the top 5 or top 1%. Top 1% obviously is the limit to get into Mensa, and then you're looking into yeah exceptionally smart people. Um, but so if you have that intellectual capacity and you're not wealthy, the legitimate question is, look, you understand that your capacity is at a different level than the average, but then you see like slightly above average people who are doing really good financially. Like, how do you justify that to yourself? Um, because you understand inherently that it's a question of hard work or perhaps smart work and then a long-term perspective. So somebody, for example, who makes, let's say, a little bit above average income, but they always put a good chunk of it aside and they invest it not necessarily brilliantly, but relatively smartly. And then you accumulate that into 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Obviously, that person is going to get wealthier. And but it doesn't really require you to be, exceptional in terms of ability. You don't need to be the CEO of a publicly listed large company to do that. You don't have to be an innovator that creates a Fortune 500 company. Of course not. But a long-term perspective, and perhaps not even working that hard, but working smart, could get you there. But then that requires a level of discipline. That's number one. And yeah, number two, you have to have a goal in your mind saying, I want to be wealthy. Because these things don't just happen. For example, if you're still renting when you're 35 or 40, that's a sign that you're not thinking these things through. Like, subject to the jurisdiction you're in, most places people want to own their house, their apartment, right? There's tax incentives, plus it's an asset to own it instead of renting. Obviously, Robert Kiyosaki might disagree, saying, yeah, you should rent and you should then buy assets. Of course, I'm all for buying assets, but buying your own place in a lot of countries, that's the first asset that you're buying. And everybody's got a necessity to live somewhere. Now, I'm getting on a rant. I need to get back to the high IQ and the toxic mindset. If you're high IQ, but you don't have discipline, and you don't educate yourself, Because it's one thing. Let's take a person who, at 16, 17 years old, they realize a guy who's growing up and they're 2 meters tall, which is what in the US, that's 6'7". Um, they realize like I've got an advantage over most people. So they don't have to do a whole lot of effort to like dribble a little bit with a basketball or volleyball, and they're going to be really good at it. But because they know they have a natural advantage, but if they're not disciplined or they're lazy, you might have a guy who's 180 tall, 185 tall, but they are super disciplined. They are thinking long term and they practice all the time, and they just want to get to the next level. They don't have the natural advantage, but they can be a lot better in terms of volleyball or basketball compared to the guy who's got that natural advantage. So I think that there's a similarity between a resource curse that you might have in countries like the Middle East or Venezuela, for that matter, Bolivia. There's a bunch of countries that are rich in resources, but they just fuck it up because of corruption, etc. That's a different topic. But these people who've got a natural proclivity and their identity is based on like I'm smart, I'm intelligent, um, and who knows, maybe they've got 2, 3 PhDs, but they're broke or they don't have much money. The question is, what is lacking in you that you simply cannot comprehend that if I asked a random 100 people off the street, like, do you want to be a millionaire? I will guarantee at least 95 of them are going to be like, yeah, sure. Now, how many of said 100 people are millionaires? Maybe a few, right? So everybody understands that everybody, except for some hermits or some weirdos, don't want to be wealthy, don't want to be millionaires. But extremely few people are millionaires. Now, the probability of starting from zero and becoming a millionaire is the highest if you are intelligent. So you can grasp a lot of concepts very quickly, and you can operate in a complex environment because of this, right? And then number two is the conscientiousness. So if you're very intelligent, but you haven't figured out how to make money, it's like you gotta be lazy, you you gotta lack discipline, or then you just have a very toxic mindset for some reason, believing that money is just burning in your pocket, so you have to get rid of it, or money is a curse, and it just you cannot fathom having a shit ton of money in your account or in your investment portfolio. And yet you ask them, would you like to be a millionaire? They say, yeah. But most of the time, what they fail to realize, like, okay, if you're intelligent but you're not rich, but you would like to be rich, is in order to get there, what you're doing right now is not cutting it. So you have to change something. It's the same thing as if you're overweight. You're like, I'd like to be in shape and feel better about myself and have more energy. Great, you can do it. But you got to change something. So when people have the wrong mindset, they might have all the tools to say, I can get to a different level socioeconomically because, for example, I was born with plenty of IQ, but you're not getting there because your mindset is like, let's say you're lacking confidence. Okay, you're lacking education, you're not reading, you're not educating yourself. It doesn't matter if you're like, past 2 meters tall and you're like, hey, I'm a great basketball player, but you need to practice because sooner or later there's going to be somebody who has the same natural advantage as you or even less, but they're just better because they've been practicing more, they've been finding out how to get better. And this is kind of a toxic mindset. So easily I could count half a dozen people I know that are extremely intelligent, but yet these people are all financially in kind of a shitter. And I found that extremely sad because had these people made slightly better decisions in terms of a mindset and whether they want to study arts or whether that's their passion or whatever. But if you know you're smart, you don't have to put in that much effort to educate yourself about money and finances. And kind of with your left hand, you can become wealthy while, being busy doing your own passion, which obviously I hope everybody gets to kind of fulfill their passions in life and their ambitions. Great. But especially those people who are very intelligent. Like you have a problem if you're not wealthy because you're missing something. you are missing something. Because especially in the West, becoming wealthy is not that difficult. But you're lacking education, which means that you're prioritizing your time wrong and you're lacking discipline. And that's unfortunate because then the other problem with people, let's say, who are very intelligent but they haven't made it in life is easily kind of either a victim mindset, which, well, that's just either it comes from a, let's say, a lower threshold of you were born into a lower socioeconomic level, so you don't have the mindset of like, okay, I can actually get up there and I can be a winner in whatever scale I believe a winner should be. Or then they have that lack of discipline. For example, if they're super smart but they could make good money, they easily, drop that into gambling, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, women, and I'm talking from a guy's perspective. So it's like if you have a strength, for example, whether it's physical or especially mental, then you should be cultivating it very carefully because a lot of times when you have some inherent strength, there's also a weakness of similar magnitude. So, and if you don't work on that weakness to reduce the effect of said weakness into your own life, it can mess you up really bad. So yeah, it's just I've come across these situations lately so much that just wanted to share a few thoughts on the topic. Um, and then one of the things that I also came across in the last week, 2 3 times, is discussions with people who've been very intelligent, who've kind of messed up with their life. But then if you challenge them just by asking very kind of surface level questions, but poignant questions, they realize like, okay, that question is challenging my belief system, and that person probably perceives that I might have messed up in my life. They don't openly say, but their question reveals something because these people are smart. They figure it out. So, but when you kind of ask those poignant questions that make them think a little bit, it is questioning their ego investment that they might have had 20, 30, 40, 50 years in a certain belief system. And when you question a belief system that they have an ego investment in, obviously they get super defensive. And despite them being high IQ, basically the constructive dialogue is down the drain. Because now they perceive, and it's important, this is a perception, they perceive you to be attacking them personally, despite you just asking a very surface level poignant question that has an effect that might trigger these people. And then they might call you and say, oh, you're an asshole, you're stupid, you're just twisting things and you're trying to, point fingers and you try to be malicious. And it's like, no, I'm kind of gently trying to question and expose your rotten belief system, but because of that ego investment you have in that rotten belief system, you get triggered and you take it personally. So how do you deal with a person like that? It's like there's not a whole lot you can do. On an individual level, on a human level, I would hope and I would wish that everybody does that self reflection, because if there's something in your life that's going wrong, whether it's at work, financially, with your health, with your family, with your friends, whatever field it is, but if it's not working and you're kind of banging your head against the wall or you're going from failure to failure, it's not because you're a victim of oppression or whatever bullshit you might come up with. It's that there's something wrong in what you're doing. And what you're doing is a mere reflection of how you see the world. What is your belief system? And then doing that self reflection of like, oh, maybe there's something I need to adjust in my belief system in order to improve the quality of my life. That means that you have to first humble yourself to say, okay, I haven't got it all figured out. Damn. So that lack of humility is oftentimes that's the root cause of the problem. It's one of these things that there was a friend of mine who told me recently. Like all around the West, you've got this Pride Month. Now let's look at it. Let's kind of peel a layer back. Pride. What was the first sin by Lucifer? Why he was cast away from heaven, right? This is in the Bible, right? It was pride. He thought he would be equivalent to the Son of God. So the original sin was pride. Now, what happened? This goes back to the Old Testament. What happened after the flood? There was a covenant made by God, right? The covenant was, I will never flood the earth again. And what was the symbol of that covenant? It was rainbow, right? So the original sin was pride, and the covenant of not destroying humanity was a rainbow. So now look at what pride means, especially in the West. You look at these people, like they're like the clothes they're wearing is like, it's crazy. It's like from a like Sodom Gomorrah, retarded sex party with leather and chains and like what the fuck, man. So it's things get twisted, and nowadays if you say, well, I'm not into that, LGBT, trans, whatever, then they go like, oh, you're not tolerant enough, you're wrong, we should cancel you. Anyways, the last minute was something I just wanted to throw in there. But yeah, it's like that friend who told me about this, like, hey, think about what was the original sin and what was the covenant after the flood. I'm like, okay, pride, great. Is it an accident that these two things are combined in the current kind of degeneracy of the Western society? Is it an accident? Hardly. Could be. It could be, but hardly. I'm thinking somebody is kind of laughing their butt off, saying, look, we're playing you guys. You're like sheep. You're like pigs going to the slaughterhouse, man. Somebody's laughing their butt off just watching these developments right now. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on this. I'll get back. There's a couple of more things I've got in mind to share in the near future.